You're listening to the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast, where you'll gain the tools, knowledge, and confidence you need to erase the unknowns, feel in control, and have an even better birth no matter how you deliver. My name is Liesel Teen, mom of two, practicing labor and delivery nurse, and your host. From over 8 years and counting of working at the bedside, I know that knowledge is the key to an even better birth. So tune in each week to learn about all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum from me, a labor and delivery nurse that's seen it all. And now let's get into this week's episode. Welcome back to the 12 weeks of birth. It is week 9, I believe. I know we've been skipping some weeks. And like I said last week, you guys know, it's been a little hard over here, but I got an episode for you today. And guess what? I got an episode coming out next week and the following week and the following week. Because guess what I'm about to do right now? I'm about to batch a bunch of episodes, and I'm body doubling right now with my sister and one of my other girls who works for me. So I'm getting my stuff done, I promise. But I have some episodes coming out for you actually in the right timing, and I'm very excited about that. But anyways, this week, I have a very special episode for you. This is one, I always say this, but this is one of my favorite episodes. And that's why I did this series is right. I'm trying to choose my favorite episodes, but this one actually is one of my favorite episodes that I've done with a guest. And I've had many, many guests on the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast. But this guest, her name is Natalie Bacon, and she came on and we talked about mindset tips. And if you don't know who Natalie Bacon is, I know most of you guys aren't bloggers, but if you're a blogger, you probably know who Natalie Bacon is, because Natalie Bacon has been out there for a long time blogging. And she's one of the greats that I looked to when I was first starting Mommy Labor Nurse. So I did fangirl a little bit with her when I was recording this episode with her. I remember that. But anyways, so I chose this episode for you because it's actually a very, very popular episode. People go back and listen to this episode quite frequently, because it gives so much value. She gives so many great mindset tips and relates it to life and birth. And I just thought it was such a good one to reshare. So let's get into it. Hi, Natalie. Welcome to the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast. Thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk to you today. So can you just start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do for a living, where you're from, like what you ate for breakfast, whatever.
All the good stuff, right?
All the
most
good stuff.
Important stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So I am a certified life coach for moms, and I do a lot of coaching around mindset. I wasn't always a life coach. I was an attorney for a little while, and then a financial planner, and then probably similar to you, sort of started an online business and transition many times, applied mindset work to my own life. And that has led me to where I am today, which is married, expecting, and having this community of moms who I get to help really overcome a lot of the mindset drama in their own lives in any area, including when they are expecting as well.
Yeah, because I'm sure, obviously, it's a big life change. So there's going to be a lot of anxiety that comes with that. And I'm sure, probably your coaching is a gold mine to someone who has anxiety, like generalized anxiety.
Yeah. Any sort of worry or a lot of overwhelm, all the good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I thought you would be a great guest to come on to the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast and really talk to us about some mindset shifts revolving around birth and pregnancy. So I thought it would be great if you started off maybe with why education is so important regarding birth. And then we can get into more pain and, changing your mindset about pain, because we talk a lot about that in our courses about how, I have a specific lesson in the natural series specifically about mindset and how it's 90% mental, it hurts. Yes, it's 90%
I went through it all.
mental.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah. I was like, this is it.
Yes, like birth is so, so mental. Like it's crazy, regardless of if you go unmedicated or not. But your mind is such a powerful, awesome tool, but also like it can be your worst enemy. So I know that's a lot. Sorry. But let's start off with maybe some mindset tips about education and like why education surrounding birth is so important.
Yeah. So I think that the fear-based brain will really lead you to places that feel very scary. So your
Yeah.
brain thinks that the unknown is terrifying. Your brain wants to just know exactly how things are going to go. And we feel a sense of control if we know exactly how things are going to go.
Yeah.
So when you educate yourself, you can feel more empowered to make better informed decisions. You can't know for sure exactly what's going to happen. So you can't plan your exact childbirth, but you can prepare for it. And I think educating yourself ahead of time, even on some of the topics that maybe you're a little bit fearful of, can actually eliminate some of those fears. I know you share so many amazing birth stories, and I think this is one way people are educating themselves through all of your content. But however else you want to educate yourself can be really, really helpful so that you feel more empowered to make decisions too, particularly if and when things change, and not being so attached to it has to go this one way, and knowing there are lots of ways it could go. Of course, I'm going to have a preference. I'm still going to do a birth plan, but also if things change, how do I want to approach it then? And not saying this is sort of my plan B, but preparing yourself with the resources that you offer, really, and educating yourself can help you make decisions ahead of time about, different options that you may want to take. One of my good friends, just had her epidural fall out during birth, and she ended up with this unplanned C-section. And of course, that's very rare, but knowing that there are lots of different possibilities, if you're more educated and prepared for it, you can say ahead of time to yourself, all right, if some of these things happen, what do I want to decide? What do I want to do and think and feel in those moments?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you should come and work for Mommy Labor Nurse, because that is exactly what we're all about. It's like educating on all aspects of birth, because really at the end of the day, I was just talking about this on a different podcast, but really at the end of the day, you can have preferences and you can make your birth plan, but sometimes things happen. Your baby really is like a lot of times the ultimate decider in certain situations. Like your baby could decide just to not tolerate labor because he's holding on to that umbilical cord and it's wrapped, around whatever, and it's causing his heart rate to have these changes, and it's not tolerable for him to come out vaginally, and you have to have an unplanned C-section. But it's important to educate yourself on, like you said, all aspects of birth, because there are like an infinite amount of things that can happen. So if we try to cover like as many as possible, there's going to be a much higher likelihood that you're going to come away from that experience with a positive mindset instead of birth trauma, which is ultimately what we're trying to avoid with our courses.
And it can, to kind of piggyback off that, it can seem like we're saying go into information overload, but that's actually not true. Education can be really empowering because, yes, you'll be learning a lot in the months leading up, but it leaves you feeling so much more empowered to make those decisions.
Yes.
Versus feeling very fearful and scared and powerless and unsure.
Yeah. And I think also going on that, we have a good section in the course all about advocacy and about like how to even approach your provider if you're uncertain about a certain something. A lot of people don't even realize that you can ask questions of your provider, ask questions of your nurse, or like question, like, why are you suggesting that you should break my water? Like, why are you suggesting Pitocin right now? Like, I remember when I first came out with the natural series, I had one of my
good friends go through it just like as a favor to me. And she didn't have any kids at the time. Well, she still doesn't have any kids, but she didn't have any kids. And one of the things that she said afterwards, she was like, I didn't realize that like you can like make decisions. Like you don't have to do whatever your provider or your doctor says. Like it's important to find a provider that you trust and that you can have conversations with, of course. But like, yeah, at the end of the day, it's so important. Like you can ask questions if something doesn't feel right. And you really, at the end of the day, should listen to your body and listen to your mind and listen to your partner. If your partner, same goes for your partner, if your partner asks questions. So I think that's a good segue though into like listening to your body and pain mind shift. I'm going to say that a few times to be able to say it. Mindset shifts.
Yes, I love
but
it.
I think that's a good segue into pain too, because like I said in the beginning, pain is one of those that most people are fearful of going into birth, but it really can be such a mindset shift.
Yes, right. I know. I'm like, it really is a tongue twister. I love what you said there because you said pain and then you said fear of pain. And I want to pause and notice the difference here because there's the actual pain and then there is the fear of the pain.
Yes.
And when you go into your body, and by going into your body, I mean really listening to your body and allowing it and trying to stay out of your head, which is where all that fear is coming from. The pain is there. And yes, it is uncomfortable. And I want you to expect pain, but you can make the pain like more manageable if you're not adding fear to it. It's kind of like if you're feeling nervous about something and then you start thought looping and worrying, that nervousness turns into anxiety and it can get so bad it turns into a panic attack, right? So same thing here when we're talking about physical pain and discomfort during labor and delivery. We want to practice, and you can practice this now ahead of time, not with labor, but with any discomfort that you're feeling. Slow down, get into your body and just ask your body, what am I feeling right now? What does my body need from me right now? And at first it can kind of feel awkward if you've never done this sort of work, but it can really be powerful because it gets you out of the natural primitive brain's tendency, which is to go into fear. And it's just a survival mechanism. Your brain always wants to avoid pain and seek pleasure. So when it's in a lot of pain, it wants to avoid that, which is great if we're being chased down the street. It's right. It's not as useful in our suburban homes or when we're having the pain during something physical like labor and delivery. So what you want to do is allow the pain. And I promise you, you can practice this at any time ahead of time to get good at it. And it will make the pain less painful instead of more painful. Like there will still be discomfort there. So it's expecting that discomfort, but instead of worrying about it or fearing it or wishing it wasn't there and sort of what I call pushing it away, you allow it and sort of surrender to it. And it's almost like you're talking to your body as if it was separate and apart from you and really listening to it and allowing your body to do its thing without sort of getting in the way.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm like, I should be jotting down notes of like points that I should add to our birth course, like about that. How can I make that section even better?
Right. The mindset section. I was like, oh, this is my jam. Like, I love it.
Yes. It's so important. People love that section too, because once you look at it that way too, a big takeaway that I have in the courses too is like, we want to turn that anxiety that you have into excitement. We want to turn anxiety. We don't even want it to be, we want it to be you're informed, but we also ultimately want you to be excited about your birth,
I call it performance anxiety, like before you're going to go on stage or speak or, like that presentation. It's performance anxiety to me feels a little bit more like excitement than just generalized anxiety, which has this undertone of, disappointment or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, the sound of that heartbeat means it's time for this week's segment of Birth It Up Babies. This one says, I just wanted to say thank you for the course. I went in for an unplanned induction at 39 and a half weeks planning for a natural birth. After 4 rounds of Cytotec, Cervidil for 12 hours, and Pitocin for 12 hours, I opted for an epidural. Although this wasn't in the plan, and she put in parentheses, honestly, nothing about the induction was planned, I felt confident in my decision making, and I was so thankful that you touched on induction and epidurals during the natural course series that I took. I was complimented on my coping mechanisms and flexibility throughout the whole thing. My nurse told me she was impressed with my pushing and breathing techniques, even after 3 days of being in the hospital and 23 hours of active labor. That whole long story just to say thank you. Oh, I will always encourage your courses for my friends in the future. Thank you so much for your message. I love it. And I'm so glad I could help make that experience not something that was traumatic, and not something that you go back and look at like, oh my gosh, I feel like I got like pushed into these things, and I feel like I made decisions, based on what my actual knowledge is. So I'm so happy to hear that I could help. And if you want to have an even better birth, just like this mama, head on over to mommylabornurse.com/courses to get lifetime access to all 3 of my online birth classes.
Okay. So Natalie, can you now talk about, like, we have a lot of times people go into birth and things might be changing, right? So is there any mindset shifts? I'm going to get it by the end of the episode.
You're
I promise.
I love it.
I'm getting there. Are there any mindset shifts that you can use to, when you're thinking about, like, what if things change in my birth or in postpartum or in wherever?
Yes. So I call this your inner coach and your inner critic. And we all have both. And you basically want to talk back to your inner critic.
Oh, yeah.
And most of us just think that whatever our mental chatter, whatever the voice in our head is telling us, has to be the way it is. And instead, what I say is that just might be your inner critic. Let's bring your inner coach out and see what she says. And I think that this takes a little bit more thinking. So if you can do this ahead of time and kind of get some phrases, or it could be affirmations or things how you would want to coach yourself when things aren't going according to plan. So let's say something changes. It's not exactly what you had planned for. How do you realistically want to think and feel about it? So you might not want to be, this is the best thing ever, because you don't really believe that. That wasn't your first choice. But you also don't have to go where your inner critic wants to go, which is, this is the worst thing ever, and I'm in all of this fear. So instead, is there space in the middle for you to coach yourself and say, well, this isn't my first choice, but I'm here. I can do this. Let's make the best decision, giving what we know now.
Yeah.
And kind of practicing that mindset ahead of time so that when it is labor and delivery, like you were mentioning, sometimes we get a little bit nervous or unsure of how to question authority, or whether it's physician or I think anyone in authority, we just kind of take what they say. But if you're practicing, feeling confident in trusting yourself, what you can do is you can bring out this inner coach who talks back to your inner critic, and also might question some of the options that your provider might suggest. Like maybe you're pretty educated on the options and something changes during labor and delivery, and your provider suggests one thing, and your inner critic is kind of telling you, this is horrible, I don't want to do this. Having that confidence for your inner coach to come forward and say, I hear what you're saying, but is there another option? Because that doesn't sound like something I'm super excited to do. And utilizing that inner coach ahead of time. And like you said, even postpartum, all the time, right? It's a mindset shift that you can
said
use.
it right.
Slowing down to make sure, right? I think it's just a useful tool anytime, particularly when we're in some sort of physical pain and discomfort, where the tendency is our primitive brain to just take over. And part of that primitive brain wants to be so in control and avoid pain. And that inner coach can simply be there to say, hey, slow down, take a deep breath, listen to your body. Nothing's gone wrong. This is simply a lot of physical discomfort and it's hard and I can do hard things.
Right.
That I think is more grounded and useful than, when we get to extremes where this is rainbows and daisies and childbirth should go this way and be easy, or it's horrible and fearful and there's so much doubt. Can we meet ourselves in the middle and say, yeah, there's discomfort here and there's some physical pain and I'm here for it and I'm open to it and I'm going to show up and sort of be open to change and know that there are no failures at all. There's no failures in childbirth, even if that means you have an unplanned C-section or you get pain medication that you didn't plan on getting. I think as important as deciding on your birth plan, it's deciding ahead of time to be flexible.
Yes.
I think that can feel so good and empowering that, yes, this is my birth plan, but also my plan is to be flexible and listen to my body.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you said that there's no failures in childbirth too, because that reminds me of a movement that recently happened. Peanut started I forget even what they call it now, but they basically said, like, why are there all of these terms in birth that revolve around failure? So like we call a failure to progress, if you're having a C-section because baby's, not descending, like a failure to descend is baby's not descending. Failure to progress is like you get stuck at a certain centimeter. There's all of these like terms medical terms that we use they have like this icky feeling. So like, why is that? So it's just like another degree of like, wow, like mindset and words are like so important here.
It's so important that you said that. Even going back to the examples we gave with anxiety versus excitement or performance anxiety. When you say the words, when you say the thoughts, same thing with affirmations, how do they feel for you?
Right.
Anytime we hear the word failure and we're talking about it and we're in there and they're saying it's failing, that does not feel good. And so going into it with the mindset of things might change and I can be prepared to trust myself and trust my body and trust the process can be so much more grounding and comforting than, everything hangs on my birth plan and has to go according to plan, which whenever we sort of hang our own confidence and certainty on something outside of us, it can cause even more anxiety because we don't have control over how things will go, right? Everyone's different.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have a hunch that's probably what your coaching is all about, is like life is full of things that we can't completely plan like to a T. So like, look how important it is in birth and like, look how it applies to your life too.
Absolutely. And I think the mind-body connection through childbirth, there's just so many lessons there because for all of the women who want to plan and have everything go according to plan, there's only so much you can plan. And being prepared, like we said in the beginning, can be really helpful. And being educated can be really empowering. But then also, so is slowing down, listening to your body, and allowing there to be that balance of here's the plan, but also I am flexible and open to doing what's best for myself and my baby in that moment.
I love it. Well, I have one last question for you, Natalie, if you don't mind sharing. I know you said you're due at the beginning of this year. Do you have any hunch? I know you're not, as I've talked to you, you're not dead set on a plan, but do you have a hunch what your maybe birth preferences would be during your own birth?
So I love that you asked this question because it's already changed so much. So
really?
Yeah. Initially, I was actually all in on C-sections because my mom had 3 and we have narrower hips and big babies. I was 9 pounds. My brother was 10.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was one thing. But then I started educating myself, reading books, went through your courses, and I swung the other way.
Yeah.
Which was amazing to learn about the history and all of the things, right? And then the practical stories and the recent stories and this balance between modern medicine and natural birth and doulas, all of it. I've just I love it. So where I'm at right now is I want to do a natural birth, but I also want to have a plan for how I want to show up if we need to go to a C-section. Like, I'm not going to think of it as a failure. I've already decided that. And so for me, I want to plan for the discomfort, but not have the panic there. So that's where I'm at. And this is so fun because we'll be able to touch base or I'll share it somewhere.
Yeah. I would love to have you come back on and do a birth story episode. I'm very curious.
Let's do it, right? Let's do it. So I think of myself as somewhere in the middle there where I definitely am looking forward to it. And again, it's the mindset because I was thinking, well, my mom had to have 3 C-sections, so then I probably will, and big babies and, and that gets in your head. And then I have a regular provider, but then because I'm 35, I also am considered high risk. So I have to go to the high risk provider twice, which I loved because everything's healthy and he could just give me all the extra info. And he was like, I see no reason why you wouldn't have a natural vaginal birth. And it was fascinating to see my mind shift, seeing his confidence in me.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's powerful. And so I'm all about now just trusting my body and that being the plan, but also kind of from a place of detachment where I'm not hanging my worth or, a success on whether this is a natural birth.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Well, Natalie, where can we find you on social media and, your services that you offer? Tell us everything.
Honestly, just nataliebacon.com is my site. And I have a podcast too. So Design Your Dream Life with Natalie Bacon. That's it.
Cool. I love it. Yeah. Thank you
for having me. This was so fun. I can't wait to update you in the next.
I know. I've had a couple of people come back on like after their birth stories and it's just always so fun to hear, like, this is what I thought was going to happen. And then, this is what actually happened, or, maybe it did go exactly how they envisioned it. I mean, it's cool. Birth is it's so fun. So I'm excited to have you back on.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I love the work that you do and your courses have been fantastic.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Already feeling a little more confident about pregnancy, birth, and newborn life? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can continue to erase the unknowns and never miss an episode. And if you're looking for even more, Instagram is definitely where I hang out the most. Come join our community of more than 500,000 moms for birth education, tips, and solidarity. You can find me at mommy.labornurse. Check out today's show notes and a searchable library of every Mommy Labor Nurse podcast episode at mommylabornurse.com/podcast. And while you're there, be sure to head to the blog to learn about our online birth classes too. See you next week. And remember, you can have an even better birth no matter how you deliver.